Alright, this is lesson 7.5. This is a fun part of factoring because it's a special case, a very special case, and that is that you're factoring a difference of two squares. Now, we're going to review something for a moment here, and that's that if I give you two conjugates, let's say x plus 1 times x minus 1. Remember how they're not opposites, they're conjugates, which means there's just the addition and subtraction are different in both pieces. If I FOILed this, I get x squared, outside is negative 1x, inside is a positive 1x, and last is negative 1. These cancel out and you're left with x squared minus 1. Only two terms. Now that means that if I have something like this, if I want to factor it and go the other way, it's actually pretty straightforward. X squared would be the first piece of each one, or x would be the first piece of each one, in other words the square root of x, and then the square root of 1 would be the second piece. And I say that because 1 times 1 is 1, the square root of 1 is 1, and you'll see that when we get to a different number that'll make more sense. Alright, so let's take a look at the first one. Now again, these are nice to factor. These are actually the kinds of problems where you should say, oh sweet, I love these are going to be easy, not much work to them. That's great, because if you understand that these are much easier than the other ones, you're going to be excited to see these kinds of questions. But you can't do it unless two things are true. One is it has to be subtraction. Alright, and it's a difference. That's what difference means. And it has to be a difference of two squares, which means I can square root whatever is here and whatever is here. If I can't do those two things, then I can't factor it like we're talking about. So what is the square root of 16v squared? Well, the square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of v squared is v. And I put that first in each one. Again, if I FOIL 4v times 4v, I get 16v squared. The 9b squared, well, the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of b squared is b. Again, I can check this because if I take 3b times 3b, I get 9b squared. And then the difference now is to put different signs in there. They cannot both be plus, they cannot both be negatives, they have to be conjugates. And that's what this is stating up here. Alright, next one. Let's see. Okay, so over here, what do they have in common? Let's look at this first. Alright, well, it's not a difference of two squares right now. But if I notice, and this is prepping you, okay, because it doesn't always start out the way it should, but this is a good example of saying, okay, I notice that I can take a 3 out. They're both divisible by 3, and I can take an h out. And if I do that, alright, this is kind of back in a couple lessons ago, I would get 9h squared, and if I divide 3h by 3h, I get 1, so minus 1. Now, we would stop here a couple lessons ago, but now we have the ability to say, look, I have a difference of two squares. I can go one step further. So I have 3h sitting here, so I'm going to factor the rest of this. It's a difference of two squares, so I say to myself, what's the square root of 9h squared? And that would be 3h. Again, if I FOILed it first times first, I would get 9h squared. Square root of 1 is 1. And then I just have to make sure I have different signs. Because when I FOIL conjugates, I don't have a middle piece. I have a binomial. And this is your answer. So that factoring out the 3h helped us see that we had actually something else we could factor further. But as is, we couldn't factor it very much, except for the 3h. So we happen to notice that when we took the 3h out, we had another circumstance arise that was factorable. Let's try the next one. Now here we have 9y cubed minus 4x. Now this one I see a problem, so let me check something. Alright, double check that. I think we have a typo, so I'm going to fix this. Alright, so I'm going to make these both y's, because that we wouldn't be able to do anything in that case if they're different variables. So I'm going to take a y out. If I take a y out, I get 9y squared minus 4. Again, notice that we have something that is a difference of two squares. So I factor that, And the root of 9y squared is 3y, so I put that in the first position of each set of parentheses. Square root of 4 is 2, and then make sure I have different signs. And that's all. Over here I'll make them both x's. So I'm going to take out, in this case, I'm going to take out a negative x, because notice it has to be a difference. So I'm going to take out a negative x, and that will give us a 4x squared minus 9. So now we have a difference of two squares again. So if I factor that one, we get 2x, that's the square root of 4x squared, and a 3, that's the square root of 9, and different signs. So again, not too bad. Now here we have some different, a little bit different situation. I'm going to rearrange this, and I'm going to write this as negative 4b squared plus 121. Now I'm going to take a negative out. Actually, I'm going to take out, I'm going to take out a negative so it looks like this. And see what that looks like. So if I factor that, I get 2b. I get square root of 121 is 11, and plus minus. And that works. Alright, down here, again, very interesting. We have a little bit different situation here. Again, I'm going to rearrange this. Again, I just double check to make sure I'm not leading you astray because of ordering and little issues like that. Let's keep it just to show that I did not actually have to take this negative out. Okay? Alright, sorry about the interruption there. Okay, so like I was saying, I didn't have to take out a negative. I can redistribute that, but look what would happen if I did put it back in. I would only put it into one of them. In that case, we would get negative 2b minus 11, and then 2b minus 11. Okay, so it's okay to leave it like that. Now, if you look at this next one, we have, but we're only going to one of them, remind you. Only one, not all of them. Now, here we have a difference of two squares, but you're going to get an interesting result. If I factor this then, now, 625, the square root of 625 is 25. The square root of x to the fourth, well, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of x to the fourth is x squared. So notice the pattern. The square root of x to the sixth is x to the third. So you're taking half of it. Okay? So you'd have x squared and x squared, and then you'd go plus minus. Now, an interesting thing happens. We can factor if it's a difference of two squares. This one is a new difference of two squares. This one is an addition, so it's not a difference. It's a sum of two squares, so that is not factorable. So that one stays the same. But this next one is factorable. Again, 25, square root of that is 5. And x squared, square root of that is x. And we got plus minus. Different signs. Okay? So you actually have three binomials here, because when you factored one difference of two squares, you end up getting another one to continue. Let's try the next one. Alright, we factor this one. It is a difference of two squares because square root of 4a to the fourth is 2a squared. And b to the fourth is b squared. Plus minus. Now if you look at this one, again, difference of two squares, we have a difference, but you can square root the b squared, square root the a squared, but 2 does not. You cannot square root that. So the difference of two squares here, this is not a square. So we cannot go any further, so this would be done. Okay, now I'm going to do one last thing because it's just been bugging me. I want to go back to this one, and I'm going to, it doesn't quite jive with me here, so I'm going to take a look at this here. Alright, and I'm going to delete it. And we're going to do that one without changing the order, because for some reason it's bugging me. But I'm going to take this and approach it like we did the last ones, okay? So I'm not going to change the order. I'm just going to factor it. And I got 121, square root of that is 11, and then 4b squared is 2b, and then a difference like that. And that's good. So this would be your answer. So I'm going to take that out. I don't like it for some reason. So this is what I want you to look at. So we won't have to worry at all about changing the order. Just go ahead and leave it like that, and we're good to go. Alright, thank you for your patience, and this ends lesson 7.5.